Breonna Taylor, a black woman, was fatally shot by Louisville, Kentucky police in March 2020 during a no-knock search warrant at her home. Taylor's boyfriend, believing intruders had entered, fired a lethal weapon in self-defense, prompting officers to return fire. Taylor's death, along with the case of George Floyd, who died after a white police officer knelt on his neck for over 9 minutes in Minneapolis, sparked a wave of nationwide protests, calling for racial justice and denouncing police violence against people of color.
Black people are permanently committed to Black lives, right? That never wavers because it is inherently connected to our existence. So whether we're talking about 2020, 2025, 2014, 1960, we are equally committed to our dignity, to our culture, and to our political freedom. Now, if you're asking where the wider movement, inclusive of corporations and philanthropy and government is, I think there's obviously been a regression that is anti-diversity, equity, and inclusion, which one may say is proof that the movement was working.
On July 21st, Breonna Taylor's attorneys, Ben Crump and Lonita Baker, expressed gratitude to a U.S. federal judge for sentencing former Louisville police officer Brett Hankison to 33 months in prison for violating Taylor's civil rights during the raid that led to her death. However, they argued that the sentence was not sufficiently deterrent. Taylor's mother, Tamika Palmer, along with other family members and Kenneth Walker, Taylor's boyfriend at the time, were present in court, urging the judge to impose the maximum penalty.
Tamika Palmer, her family from day one fought to get Brett Hankison and those responsible to go to prison for her daughter's death. And even though it's not what we wanted, we thought that he should have gotten more time. We are grateful to Kristen Clark, Merrick Garland, and the Department of Justice who had the courage for the first time in the history to bring federal charges against a police officer for killing a black woman in America. 5 years now to get equal justice. And even though we are astonished what we saw in the courtroom where the prosecutors seem to argue more for the defendant, Brett Hankison, than they argued for the victims, the family of Breonna Taylor. But I want to thank all of the activists here in Louisville, Kentucky, and all across America who kept saying her name for 5 years. Say her name.
Breonna Taylor.
Say her name.
Breonna Taylor.
Say her name.
Breonna Taylor.
Today's definitely not what we wanted, but we will take 33 months in prison, followed by the 3 years of supervised release. A DOJ prosecutor, what'd y'all say his name? Rob Keenan. We don't know his name really because he hasn't been in touch with us. He sent a text message at 10 o'clock p.m. last Wednesday. And when I told him he needed to contact Tamika Palmer, he said, oh, I'll just do it in the morning. And he didn't do that in the morning. Instead, in the morning, we got a copy of the sentencing memorandum from a member of the media. That's the prosecutor that filed that motion for 1 day. That's the prosecutor that came in here today and argued harder for Brett Hankison to be released than he advocated for the victim of this case, Breonna Taylor.
I don't really got a lot to say. I think the judge did the best she could with what she had to work with. There was no prosecution in there for us. There was no prosecution in there for Breonna.
That part.
So I definitely, I'm grateful for the judge for giving some time because We could have walked away with nothing according to what they recommended. So I'm just grateful for my friends and family for steady showing up, and no matter how disappointing we seem to be, but we still here, and I'm just grateful that something happened today.
Tamika, you were frustrated at that.
I'm grateful for the small piece of justice that we got. It's definitely not what I was expecting. And Brett Hankison told me I was going to go to jail for the rest of my life. So I definitely feel some type of something to see him going for, even if it's a little time.
Yeah.
So,
Breonna Taylor killing 5 years later is telling us a lot at which direction we're going to go. Are we going to continue to be a democracy that upholds the objective of liberty and justice for all? Or are we going to descend into being a police state where the police can do anything and have no accountability, even with jury verdicts? Because the jury has spoken, and they tried to act as if the jury verdict doesn't mean anything. Well, in America, in a democracy, jury verdicts speak truth to the community.
The lingering grievances surrounding Taylor's death, combined with fresh outrage over the Trump administration's recommendation of an excessively lenient sentence, erupted into protests outside the federal courthouse in Louisville hours before the sentencing hearing on Monday. Last week, Harmeet K. Dillon, Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, requested that Judge Rebecca Grady Jennings sentence Hankison to just 1 day in prison, essentially equivalent to the time he had already served when indicted, along with 3 years of probation. This recommendation was seen as signaling that the Trump administration's Justice Department would abandon long-standing efforts to address racial inequities in policing, redirecting the Civil Rights Division to serve Trump's cultural agenda rather than its original mission of confronting racial discrimination. Judge Jennings, appointed by Trump to the Western District of Kentucky during his first term, rejected this unusual request from the Justice Department. In sentencing Hankison, she stated that no prison time would be inappropriate and would undermine the jury's verdict from November. Jennings noted she was very surprised that no additional individuals were injured during the raid due to Hankison's reckless gunfire. However, she imposed a 33-month prison sentence, significantly lower than the maximum life sentence permitted by law. Hankison will not begin serving his sentence immediately. The Federal Bureau of Prisons will determine the location and timing of his incarceration. Following the killing of Breonna Taylor and the death of George Floyd, the city governments of Louisville, Minneapolis, and the U.S. Department of Justice entered into consent decrees to reform their police departments. However, in early May 2025, the U.S. Department of Justice decided to cancel these agreements. This represents a significant reversal by the Justice Department.
So my initial reaction is, to be honest, I was quite surprised. The purpose of consent decrees are to have a legally binding, enforceable agreement in place for police reform in this context. And so hearing the Department of Justice essentially retreat from the commitment to police reform, especially in Minneapolis, especially in Louisville, honestly was quite surprising. This is also expected to happen in other cities as well, meaning erasing these consent decrees. And the implications are alarming. We should expect an increase in constitutional violations. When there's no oversight, it sends a symbolic message that it's okay. This pattern, this behavior, this type of policing is acceptable. And those are the implications for communities throughout the country. So essentially what it is it's a roadmap to police reform. And so they are typically put into place after the Department of Justice has conducted an investigation looking into whether or not there are patterns and practices of unconstitutional violations, so violations of people's constitutional rights, civil rights. If they find there's a pattern and practice, meaning a culture of these types of violations, then they put forth a consent decree, which is really an agreement between that police department, the particular city officials or municipalities, And it goes before the court, and the court will look at this agreement or consent decree and decide, is this agreement fair? Is it good for public policy? And if they meet those constitutional standards, it becomes legally binding, and essentially they will have a neutral person oversee to make sure the agreement is adhered to. So certain things consent decrees will do is require additional training for police officers to remind them of what their constitutional responsibilities are to people they come into contact with.
Under former Democratic President Joe Biden, the U.S. Department of Justice aggressively pursued federal oversight of local police departments accused of widespread abuses. In contrast, the Trump administration accused the previous Justice Department leadership of relying on weak legal arguments to charge police departments while pursuing court-monitored settlement agreements deemed costly, cumbersome, and better resolved at the local level.